Thank you for your accommodation. We ran a little bit late at our first meeting. Do we have a forum this morning?
Yes.
I welcome everybody to a historical moment here in Lake George, our first in-person meeting since I can remember. And so thanks for coming out. Thanks for everybody getting out of their pajamas before the meeting, having slippers on. Two little housekeeping items this morning. First, I'd like to introduce our newest commission member, Kathy Munsell. She takes the place of the retiring Jim Nishaw, if that's possible. And we welcome you, and we're glad you're aboard, and look forward to your help and your input.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
And the second is also Lake George village-oriented. I'm sure we're all aware that Bill Dow passed, and certainly was a good thing for Lake George Village and Lake George as a whole. Coming to that, this is the meeting number 519, Tuesday, September 20th, 10 a.m. We've got a quorum, and so first item is we'll approve the meeting minutes and fiscal actions report. Everybody read the meeting minutes. Anybody have a comment or a motion?
So moved.
Motion?
Second.
Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Carried. Same with the fiscal actions report. We've looked at them. Motion?
So moved. Second.
No comments? All in favor? It's carried. And I should note that the fiscal actions report was for both July and August 2022. Item 3, presentation of harmful algae bloom, which are all concerned with on Lake George. And Dave, I'm going to let you do the introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have Lauren Townley here today from DEC, came all the way from Albany. Thank you. She unfortunately missed our last Zoom meeting, so she had to travel all the way up here. So I'm thrilled to have her. So Lauren's going to tell us a little bit about her background, but she is the key person driving the Lake George harmful algae bloom plan, working diligently for many months as an update to the previous plan that we had here for Lake George. So we're happy to have her up here kind of giving us an overview of how things are going at the DEC end. I think we've all seen, we've had some minor harmful algae blooms here on Lake George, and they're concerned. We were just at Commissioner Mason's house the other day, and so a very minor locust pearl kind of increase in that. And we haven't seen, thankfully, any significant harmful algae blooms. If that would be so bold, nothing like Lake Champlain or some other water bodies that have had those, but the whole goal is to keep that from happening. So with that, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I might have the power button on the left, so that little slide button on the left.
There we go. Well, thank you everybody for having me. It's good to see everybody in person. So my name is Lauren Townley. I'm with DEC, based in Albany, as Dave mentioned. I'm a research scientist and also a section chief, and I coordinate our watershed planning program statewide, which includes primarily our 9-element plan program and our TMDL program. But I did get involved in the last couple of years in helping with this update of the Lake George HABs Action Plan, which was really spurred on by the occurrence of blooms that happened in 2020. So this plan was updated in collaboration with the Lake George Park Commission. We also did collaborate with Department of Health and Ag and Markets. They did review the updated plan and provide comments on it before it was released to the public. Sorry if I'm blocking the screen from everybody, but just a quick outline of what I'm going to go over today. So I'm just going to go over, what are harmful algal blooms, why are we concerned about them, and how do we do reporting in New York specifically for HABs. Go back in time a little bit to 2018 when the statewide HABs initiative was launched under the direction of Governor Cuomo at the time. I'll go over a summary of all the updates that were made to the plan from the original 2018 version, go go through the list of the priority projects that were identified, including projects that were identified through a series of stakeholder meetings, and then talk about next steps and continued collaboration related to the plan. So I'm sure a lot of people in the room actually are really well versed in what a harmful algal bloom, but just a quick summary. They are cyanobacteria, they're highly specialized, and they've been present in freshwater lakes, since the beginning of time, essentially. They're considered ancient microscopic bacteria, but for some reasons that we don't 100% understand, the conditions related to temperature, light, nutrients, across the state, we're seeing more incidents of blooms where they are forming. You can see them visibly now. This is an example of one of the pictures where you can actually see the green in the lake. They do produce toxins, which are a concern to both human and animal health, and they're hard to predict. So they're something that we need to do more research on in order to better understand what the conditions that are present, why they're forming. So there is more work happening related to that research. So in terms of exposure routes, there's a couple of different ways that folks can get exposed to the toxins that are produced by HABs. One is by drinking it directly. More commonly, it's through skin. If you're swimming in an area where there is a harmful algal bloom, you can get reactions on your skin, and then there is some cases where an aerosol is produced that includes the toxins where you can inhale it. But Department of Health has produced quite a number of public outreach materials, posters, pamphlets, to inform the public on how to reduce exposure in the incident of a bloom. But generally, we just say, avoid it, don't touch it, report it if you see something. And the way that the public can report to DEC and Department of Health is through our NIHAB system, which is an online map system where anybody in the public can take a picture, upload it, include a description, and it'll get posted on our statewide website. So you can actually zoom into these different spots to see what water body has been confirmed. So we receive these reports on a daily basis. They are added to the map by DEC staff, and they remain active on the site for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, they're considered archived. You can still view the location of a HAB, but they're not considered current as of that 2-week period. And there's some filtering capability where you can zoom in, select a county if you're interested in a particular area. So going back to 2020, this is when we first observed a bloom on Lake George, which came after the development of the 2018 HABs Action Plan. So they occurred later in the season than we would typically see blooms. So they were in October and November of 2020 in several locations. There were incidents in 2021 in July, October, and November. Both years we had a hot, dry fall, and that seemed to be related to why we were seeing, but there might have been other conditions that we just don't understand right now as to why those were happening at that time. Toxins were below detection limits, but there's still a public health concern even if toxins are below detection limits. You can still experience symptoms. So in 2018, going back a few years, DEC in general, as well as Department of Health, we're seeing an increase in the amount of reports of blooms across the state. So under Governor Cuomo's administration, there was a HABs initiative that was basically launched. There was 12 priority water bodies that were selected for the development of an action plan. And these were water bodies that either had prior incidents of HABs or needed protection, like Lake George. There was 4 regional summits. So for the Lake George, it was included with Lake Champlain as well as a regional summit. The action plans were released, and then there were recommendations in those action plans for either advanced monitoring, additional watershed practices or projects and some pilot mitigation projects that are still in the research phase at this point in other lakes in the state. So overall, those have action plans, had mitigation strategies. Really what we are focused on is watershed management, which is my bread and butter. I do a lot of the watershed planning for Division of Water. Reducing nutrients is the best way that we have now, that we have control over, that we recommend in order to prevent or reduce the incident of HABs. So when we're talking about nutrient sources, it's typically wastewater treatment plants, septics, anything related to stormwater management or agriculture. Those are kind of the bigger categories of where we would see nutrients coming from. There's also some in-lake strategies that are being deployed. As I said, they're kind of in the research phase still at this point. There's a few different options that are being tested. Lake Minnetonka out in central New York is one of our test lakes where they're piloting a couple different technologies to see if when there is a bloom, we can deploy a mitigation technology to basically remove the bloom or reduce the bloom. Again, still in the research phase, there will be more in the next couple of years on the success of those mitigation technologies. So going back to the 2018 for Lake George, it did include, there was a statewide overview of HABs. There was a review of the existing water quality information. One of the great things about Lake George is there's a plethora of data available on the water quality conditions of Lake George. It's one of the best studied lakes in the state. So there was an overview of that data in the plan. There was also a list of priority projects which came out of those summits, which included mostly watershed management options. And ultimately, it was meant to be a living document. It wasn't meant to be sitting on a shelf. So at this point, it's been a few years. Things have happened. There's been a lot of effort in terms of implementation of projects and collection of more data in the lake that we wanted to reflect in this update. So overall, this is just a quick list of what has changed in the plan since 2018. So as I mentioned, any new water quality data was reflected in the plan. We did have a list of the progress of the projects that had been identified in the original 2018 plan to see if they had been implemented. Are they still in the design phase? Have they not gotten off the ground yet? Identified if there were changing priorities, so we did solicit feedback from the public through a survey just to see if there was any other projects that needed to be added or if the ranking of the priorities needed to be changed. So overall, lake monitoring activities, Lake George is a citizen science lake association program participant, so that data is reflected in here. We did include the information on the HABs history, so that included the information on the blooms that occurred in 20 and 2021. We also reflected the DWSP2, which is the Drinking Water Source Protection Program 2 plan. That program had not gotten off the ground yet in 2018. It was still in the beginning stages, but since that plan is now in development, we wanted to reflect that program exists and that there will be a drinking water focused plan for Lake George in the near future. Another data set that we wanted to take advantage of and update in the plan is the high resolution land cover data set that UVM produced in partnership with the Lake Champlain Basin Program. So this land cover data set is at a much higher resolution than the typical land cover data set that we use. So for the national land cover data set, it's a 30-meter data set. This data set is a 1-meter resolution data set. So it's much more accurate, and it's good to use watershed-specific land cover information. So we did incorporate that into the plan in place of the national land cover data set that was in the 2018 plan. We also included some information on septic density, since that was brought forward as a major concern and priority of the stakeholder groups. We did update our load estimator of nutrient sources, which is a lens tool. It's a tool that DEC has developed to do a general estimate of phosphorus loading from a watershed to a water body. So we were able to update that analysis using that high-resolution land cover data set. And then we did update the priority 1, 2, and 3 projects. So in the original 2018 plan, the priority projects were broken out into 1, 2, and 3, and then within the 1, 2, and 3 priorities, short-term, mid-term, and long-term projects. So just, these are a general overview of what has been identified as the priority 1 projects, short-term, mid-term, and long-term. So generally short-term, there's been a lot of effort and work going into completing wastewater treatment plant upgrades throughout the watershed, and then continuing to monitor their effectiveness of those upgrades. Addressing septic system issues through a program of regulatory mechanism, which we know that the Lake George Park Commission has been heavily involved in since we've even started updating this plan. And then identifying and designing and installing stormwater retrofit projects. In terms of the midterm priority, expanding sewer infrastructure to unsewered areas if it's feasible, and there was a few different areas in the watershed that were identified specifically. And then through that inspection program or the identification of failing septic systems, replacing or repairing them as part of the state septic system replacement fund program, or finding other additional funding to pay for replacement of failing septic systems. And then in terms of long-term priority, reducing inflow and infiltration, which is I&I, into the wastewater systems. There's been quite a lot of work already in this arena, but just continuing to make sure that the collection systems for each of the wastewater treatment plants is functioning the best that it should. In terms of priority 2 projects, continuing to address roadside erosion throughout the watershed. Designing a new collection and treatment system in the town of Queensbury was identified as a midterm priority, and then developing a basin-wide stormwater management plan, and then implementing stormwater reduction measures. Specifically, Beatty Road and Cedar Lane were identified, but I think that that could be implemented throughout the watershed. And then priority 3, installing additional sensors through the Jefferson project to determine, what the nutrient benefits we are seeing from implementing all these different projects, implementing a grant match program for on-site wastewater treatment system replacements, potentially creating a new wastewater district and collection system was again in the midterm. I apologize. I think that was copied and pasted from priority 2. I'll have to update that. In terms of long-term, a lot of these are related to stormwater, so I'm not going to run through all of them. But again, doing pre-treatment systems in different roadway conveyance systems to capture and treat any excess nutrients that are coming from stormwater or roadside areas. And again, these are primarily stormwater related in installation of green infrastructure retrofits, stormwater reduction, tax incentive program to evaluate basically green buildings, and then incentivizing any stormwater improvements on private property as well. So in terms of next steps, continued collaboration. Again, we don't want this plan to sit on a shelf. It should be considered a living document, and DAC wants to make the commitment that we would update it as needed in partnership with our stakeholders and other agency partners. There is a section that was added in terms of an appendix where we have the list of the priority projects and have the current status at this point, but that can be updated over time. We want to continue to prioritize these projects for state funding, so by having this plan, Division of Water funding programs will prioritize any of the projects that are identified in this plan. We also have acquired some Lake Champlain Basin-specific funding from the Lake Champlain Basin program and are going to be pairing that with some additional state funding that will be released hopefully in the beginning of 2023, but that would be specifically for non-point source projects, very similar to what's been identified in this plan. It will include things like stormwater master planning, septic inspection, and pumping is also included in that. Anything related to roadside erosion, design, implementation, that type of project would be included in this funding. So we'll definitely keep everybody in the loop as that request for proposals is released. Continuing monitoring of ambient water quality conditions, and then making sure that if a HAB does occur, it is reported through NIHABs. And then there's a lot of different watershed planning efforts happening for Lake George, which is great to see. The Lake George watershed plan is in development, and then DEC will also be working on an update of the Lake Champlain TMDL starting in 2026. So we are gearing up for that, and we'll want to make sure that all these planning efforts align with one another. So that'll be a continued area of coordination. And that's all I had for my presentation. The updated action plan is posted on our webpage right here, along with all the other DEC produced action plans. So if there's any questions, I can take those now.
Feel free, anybody has any questions to,
Good job.
Go ahead, Carol.
go ahead.
One of the things that's, been bothering me for a while is the labeling of the size of an outlet. For example, the one that happened back in 2020 was first observed by, what you would say, because it accumulated on the surface. It was an observation. It also, there was a group of us, some of us in the room that were part of that identification. And we also noticed it all the way around Assembly Point. It was also noticed all the way around to part of like up to Plum Point. At the same, it was simultaneously measured in Bolton Landing. So I think we need to be very careful about how we characterize it when we aren't measuring it. If we say something is moderate or big or minor, what happens is, that's what sticks in people's brains. But if you have not measured the extent, and we know for a fact that certainly all around Assembly Point, over towards Cleverdale, and perhaps that same balloon was all the way up to Bolton Landing, certainly went over towards Plum Point. So my characterization might be something more than minor. So I want to encourage us to measure the extent of a balloon before we, start to characterize it. But we should do that for any balloon, because that's when we'll start to find out sources and mechanisms. Mechanisms are even more important.
Right. No, that's a good point, Carol. And I believe in the NIHAB's reporting system, there is a designation for widespread versus localized. I don't know how they make that determination, and that might be something where...
That's something I actually put in my public comments, because we need to know how we make that determination.
Yeah.
Because you're not measuring anything you can't.
Yeah, and it might just be based on what we're getting as a report, but if we're only getting one report in one area, it could be happening much more widespread. But we wouldn't know about it. So, but they might make that determination if we get multiple reports in a similar area, then it might trigger that widespread threshold. So.
It was on the other side of some of the points about people reported it over Cleverdale, or certainly up to Plum Point.
Yeah.
And to me, to see that extending all the way to Bolton, it wasn't the time of the year that many of us are going to take the kayaks and go all the way up,
Right, and try to find the extent of it, but Yeah, no, that's good, and we could probably increase the amount of directions that can be given on NIHABs in terms of, you know, how we characterize those, so, yep, good point, though. Good.
Thanks, Lauren, for the presentation. I wanted to see if you could tie in with what Carol said, how DEC determines, identifies, because is it simply photographic, or are there, samples, scientific evaluation, on a determination of a hazard?
Yeah, so previously, and I'm not involved in the NIHABs reporting, so I might be misspeaking here and can provide the correct contact for that. But we now just use a visual photograph to confirm a bloom. We don't need an actual water sample. But there are cases where water samples are also collected in combination. If people are willing to do that, we have trained volunteers that can take the samples. I think it's always better to have an actual sample because then we can identify the species and then see if there's any toxins present. But in terms of whether it gets on the NIHAB's map, we do not need an actual sample.
And just a follow-up, I know there has been outreach to it, but, with the Jefferson Project, the research that they've done following some of the habitats, hopefully that can make it into any future updates to the action plans with the research and whatnot that they found after those events occurred. And I guess lastly, sorry, just want to thank the department because we did have a call a couple of years ago with, I think it's Seneca Lake that has kind of a algae monitoring or volunteers that take sections of shores.
Yep.
And I think, it's something that LGA's started performing that outreach to engage citizens so that they can become aware, outreach, and also keep an eye on the lake. Try to have our eyes everywhere. So
Yeah, that's great.
that outreach and connection matters.
Yeah, that's great because you'll definitely see it before we will. So the sooner you can see it, the sooner we can let people know about it. So no, that's a great program. Okay.
Many of the residents who live on the lake draw their house water and drinking water from the lake. I know you said that there's the map where there's reports when a hazard is been noticed and has been reported to you. But now that we're entering into that danger season, which it seems like the last 2 years have been, we would look for some type of a notification when a hazard has been noticed. If there were any possibility of the development of a notification system, we've tossed around, like, is it possible to have a reverse 911 where people could log in if they wanted to get updates, as opposed to having to think of getting up every morning and checking the website to see if anything in our area has been reported.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting concept. I think we would need to discuss that with Department of Health because I don't know who would have that information in order to then, pass that along to a private landowner. But that's something that I could take back for discussion with Department of Health. Yeah.
Lauren, just in general, I think on your website you guys have been tracking HAB since 2012, at least in terms of which ones have been reported. And when you look at, it's a great website, when you look at it, just kind of the years, it's exponential for the first several years. It started out with 4 lakes, then 8, then 16. What are you guys seeing as the statewide trend? Are you seeing a slowing of that exponential growth? Seeing it continue?
That's a good question. I would have to defer to our statewide HABs coordinator, Rebecca Gorney. As far as I'm aware, we have not seen any leveling off in terms of reporting, but it's hard to tease out whether or not people are just more aware of it, and so we're getting more reports because of that. Our outreach is working, we're hoping, or if there's something related to environmental conditions that are showing an actual true increase. So I don't know that we can fully answer that question right now, but I think in terms of reports, every year we tend to continue to see increased reports.
Can you expand on the testing for toxins piece a little bit? I mean, is that just when samples are available, or is that DOH or DEC? Do you have any sense of what share of identified HABs are being tested as toxins, and what share are being...
That's a good question. I can't answer that, but I can take that back and ask one of my colleagues, Rebecca Gorney. She coordinates all of our HABs programs, so she might have a better sense of the proportion of bloom reports to toxin samples. So, yeah.
Lauren, getting back to what Marie mentioned earlier about, all these individuals that pull their water from the lake. And I know what the Department of Health's standard is for drinking water, and then, the rest of the fluoridation water, ozone treatment, sort of like that. So keep that in mind as you mentioned the drinking water
Source protection plan, yeah.
which looks at a number of systems. I'll take Underwide, for example. I think that's one of my accounts, but these small systems. But these individual systems are not getting the same attention as all of these other systems are. And I don't have an idea, but I do want to bring it to the forefront about how important that is to keep that in mind about how we can examine that. And because when you put certain chemicals in or whatever, it might transform a chemical into a toxin. It might not eradicate it, but it might transform it, as you probably know. So we need to think about that more, so I'm just going to put that out.
Okay, yeah. No, I can bring that back to my colleagues. So in my bureau, they are working on that DWSP2 plan. I don't know if there's any recommendations of that plan that could then be applied to a local individual landowner that happens to be, pulling the water from the lake. So there might be recommendations in that plan that can kind of serve that, as well as for a municipal system. So, yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you. Appreciate your time and
No,
report.
thank you.
And,
Feel free to contact me
questions?
anytime, too, if you have other questions in the future.
Very good.
Thank you.
Moving on, another related subject is the proposed Lake George Septic Inspection Program. About a year and a half ago, as most of us remember, Chairman Young appointed a committee amongst the Park Commission to start studying the need for an septic inspection program in the Lake George Park. That committee immediately formed to receive counsel and advice from about 18 people in the industry, including municipal folks from Warren, Washington, Essex County, municipalities, some folks in the industry, some design people, some engineers, representatives of DEC and DOH that were versed in the subject. And we held numerous meetings, enough that my wife would ask me almost every morning, what time is your Zoom meeting today, kind of thing. And I would have to call Dave up and find out whether I was on meeting 4 or meeting 3. And, but we got through it. And we designed, wrote, studied the systems that are in existence, the inspection systems that are in existence in the towns of Queensbury and Bolton, and our cheerleaders for the Rock Ledge project. And we got our proposed regulations written and edited and written and edited. And we finally got them approved by Albany for further action. And why don't you tell us what the timeline is, if you would?
I can do that.
Anything else you'd like to tell?
Sure.
how we make it law.
Sure. So this has been out in the State Register for the past few weeks. The public hearing on this is scheduled for November 9th at Fort William Henry at 4 p.m. The regulations and all of the administrative documents that you have to prepare with the regulations are all on the Commission's website and are all within the State Register as well. Public comment is open until November 14th. It's open until 5 days after the public hearing. And the information is on the website where to send any public comment as well. What happens next is we take the public comment in, we go through the public hearing, wait our 5 days, review everything, staff then puts together the responses to all of the comments, and by law, we are required to respond to each, if it's a group, we respond to that group, but to each point. That is then submitted back to the Commission and to the public. At the Commission's meeting, probably November or December, I'm not sure the timeline, for that, the Commission will have all of the findings. The Commission will then also have the adoption resolution, and if it chooses, it will submit the adoption resolution, the notice of adoption. We then submit that back to the Department of State. It goes into the State Register again. There's a 2-week lag time for that, so that once it's in the State Register, it becomes effective. So it will be effective either December or January, depending on when the Commission approves it at either the November or December meeting.
Good, thank you. And the highlights of the law simply include we took the park map and then took the sensitive area, which we determined after much debate and research to be 500 feet properties, both commercial and personal, 500 feet from the water, and or 100 feet from a tributary. And all of those properties then became part of our identifiable project. Jason, sitting over here, is a wonder with maps, and he could do a map overlay, and was able to, I said once to somebody, mistakenly kind of, that we knew where every septic system on the lake was. And he challenged me, so I had to think it through, and I said, no, we know where every plot of land is that's owned, presuming that these have septic systems. So I don't know where it is in your yard, but I know where your yard is. I always said in the beginning of the project that our most dangerous customer was the person that said, septic system, what septic system? I don't know where my septic system is. And that's one of the things that we're going to get past. And the simplicity of it is, we divided the number of properties by 5 years, because it's a 5-year inspection program. A lot of people like to empty in 3 years, 4 years. The mandatory is going to be 5 years. We divide that into a 5-year list, so 1/5. So at the end of 5 years, the total number of systems will have been inspected. Most of them are going to pass, we know that. Some are going to be discovered. Some are going to be repaired to a minor issue. Some are probably going to have to be replaced. And that took us off on another angle of when necessary and when appropriate, how do we help folks replace those basically economically? Dollars are short in some spots. And so that's another project that we're working on. So anybody has any questions for it, we'd entertain them. You know the status of it is not a law right now, but it is written, so there's can't be any more changes to it effectively, although as we go down the road, we could amend it if we found a project that needed to say this is the better avenue to follow on it. But I think this is a major change. The new sewer treatment plant in the village of Lake George, the proposed Rock Ledge project, hope there's some more of those on the lake. I think Ticonderoga and Black Mountain did a sewer a year ago, 2 years ago. And it's just going to be, I think, personally, one of the best things happening to the lake in my lifetime. And so, yes.
One thing about the replacement systems, I'm from the Town of Hake. Town of Hake has a local energy program as like Bolton. Our sewer laws are written without our agency approval. We work in concert with the Adirondack Park for replacement on our sewer code and zoning code as the other towns. Has this been sent to me? How do we operate? Right now, all septic variances are town board is our local board of health. If approved, the record gets sent to the APA can then uphold the local or deny it in 30 days. How is this going to work for the replacement system? The inspection, I can see that, and when we have to embed that into our sewer law. But how are the replacement systems, especially the variances and all, which we work under Department of Health or standards, we have to hire our engineers. The property owner has to hire their engineers. The town board then decides what conditions must be placed. The APA, the conditions are strong enough, and then hold the local. That's what's been sent to the Adirondack Park agency and their approval. It's my understanding that the Park Commission does not work in concert, two separate agencies. It's not work in concert with the Adirondack Park agency, but our towns do. How is this going to work? You say, I see in one place that the replacement system is under the municipalities, but in another place in the regs, it's under you. It's going to be, I mean, these poor property owners, we have many variants, well, this year we've had a lot of on the lakefront property owners because they're just replacing failed systems and they can't meet the standards. But how is this going to be? So far, the property owner hires the engineer. They submit to the ZEO. The ZEO then sends it to the town board. The town board then sends the record to the APA. That's how our codes read. As I can see, our sewer laws are going to have to change. We can't change our sewer laws unless the APA allows us to change our sewer laws. And it's,
David, do you have a shorter answer than I do?
Yeah, so the simple answer is nothing's going to change, right? So in the reg, Joe has it in front of him, he can read it to you. The commission is responsible for the septic inspection program. The results of that septic inspection are, of course, provided to the homeowner. They'll also be provided if there's a failure or any work that needs to be done to the responsible entity that currently would be the authority that will oversee any septic system improvements. So, for example, if we find a failing system that needs replacement, that full report, of course, goes to the homeowner, and we describe that homeowner. This follow-up steps are to work with your local town on your process that's already established, and if you're working with APA, that's your process, and the commission is at that point out of it, and all we'd be looking for after whatever time frame that system was upgraded or replaced will be confirmation that that happened from the town. There'd be no, right, so the whole idea is that there's processes that have been in place for decades, and we didn't want to get anywhere in the middle of that because it works at a local level, and so we talked to, I believe, every code enforcement officer because we're concerned about overload of those towns, which is why when we're dividing out the 560 systems every year, we're going to do a geographic. So we're overwhelming the town of Queensbury or the town of Hay with a lot of potential upgrades in any particular year. But once that system has been identified is in need of upgrade or replacement, everything goes to that oversight authority to do all of the follow-up work to make sure it's compliant. And then at the end of the day, we check back and say, how has that come forward? And then we provide the results of that. So we have no internal problem with that.
So for the replacement municipality, our municipality would still be overseeing.
Nothing would change.
Thank you.
And that's close to it, so stay tuned, attend our public hearing if you'd like, or encourage your neighbors to. more the merrier, so to speak.
And we're also going to do a public hearing via Zoom as well. I know there's a lot of people that are not local, so our IT whiz at the end is going to figure out how to do both at the same time. And that may be the future of where we're going with the commission, if we can convince Justin that quick. Continue both as a forward. I think we got an email this morning that said, we have a lot of people that are not local. How do we attend this? And the current answer is watching on YouTube in about 3 hours. But we're hoping to continue live as we move forward.
It's interesting because when we started all this, and we've been tender about this, I've been on the Park Commission for a bunch of years, and we've always been interested in doing things transparently. And i.e., if we're going to have a new reg or whatever, and needs public hearing and public information, we always shot for, let's have that done in July and August so that our summer residents, et cetera, our summer property owners, seasonal, can attend. And that was our target. And we made that target with one exception. Anything we do needs approval with the folks down south. And it got down to them, and I understand the mechanics of it there. I've been there before. And so that was the only holdup that we had. And then we, with some encouragement, with some changes, minor changes and whatnot, and getting it moved from desk to desk to desk, and we got to sign off, and here we are. So we did miss our planned August, September public hearing dates, but not by an awful lot. But we were accommodating with the Zoom part, thank goodness. So that's it. We'll move on. Lake George Invasive Asian Clam Annual Survey Results.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So all commissioners have a copy of this. It's a 6-page report. It follows similar fashion as any previous year that we've done. This was the 11th year of the Lakewide Asian Clam Survey. Asian clams were discovered in Lake George in 2010 by Jeremy Farrell's kid. You guys probably know Jeremy from there in freshwater. They were on Lake Avenue Beach in the village. And since that discovery, there was a huge amount of effort and time put forward to try to eradicate Asian clams in Lake George through almost $2 million by my count. Walt was generously the guy that kept track of the money, did an excellent job. And the long and short of it is we had excellent results to the tune of 96 to 100% effectiveness at our treatment areas. But there was always minor scrape up the sediments and you shake it out and see if anything's there. And so it takes a decent amount of time, but we think it's important enough to do just to find what that expansion may be. So the answer for this year is the commission identified 2 new locations up in Glen Burnie, and the Lake George Association's outreach for invasive species around Lake George yielded the 3rd site, and that's Clay Island, which was clear last year by our measure. So now we have, I believe it's 32 sites, known sites around Lake George. And I think it's safe to say Lieutenant John's on our patrol in the southwest portion of all the beaches. That's the highest population in any area. That large stretch along the southwest shore, essentially from Lake George to Bolton, it's more likely you will find Asian clams than not. And we are starting to see them pop up in areas that we just simply wouldn't really expect it to. Around Kent was one of our new sites this year. That is around the Big Peninsula from a known site, which is Glen Burnie. How they got from that site up around the point, we don't really know. We spent quite a bit of effort with their Freshwater Institute on trying to discover how they are transported around Lake George, and there's a few different methodologies, but every now and then we'll find new sites that pop up in places. So with the board's concurrence, we're going to continue our efforts every year and to see how this is expanding. We discussed very briefly the fact that Asian clams are one more species, and there's boom bust sites. You can see massive amounts of Asian clams in the site, and that they can completely depopulate and go away. They do not do very well in the cold, but the ones that survive would tend to be more cold tolerant. And every iteration, every year, we're concerned that maybe those clams would be a little bit more cold tolerant, and they're just going to start to evolve better for the low storage technology. So thankfully, I've talked to Jeremy Farrell from Jeremy Freshwater several times about this. No one that I'm aware of has really identified any water quality impact of any significance of George from Asian clams being in here yet. From the visible perspective, you can find dead Asian clam shells at dozens of locations now, especially along the south shore that we couldn't use years ago. So we are starting to see that. All you have to do is walk by from Lizard Steamboat Company to Shepherd Park, and you will see millions of dead Asian clam shells in that area. So we're going to keep track of it, and we're going to keep doing it review. We thank our people that are involved and our volunteers that go out with us. And, we're always keeping an eye on what the state of the science is, as much as we Google and try to figure out things. There is currently no tremendously effective method of eliminating this species. Lake Tahoe is, I believe, 7 years ahead of us, and they haven't had any more success than we have. But we keep an eye on it, and thankfully, we're still doing okay for the ecology and for any recreational impact. That's a quick summary, Mr. Chairman. Answer any questions about that?
Go ahead.
The second Asian clam collection day in Sandy Bay was canceled, and an explanation was that it was thought it was not a good time to disturb the base of Sandy Bay. Can you explain? Do you know why that was?
That did not come out of the commission. I saw some emails going around about that. I think the concern was that the city might lead to nutrient release from sediments, which may be a challenge for increasing harmful algae blooms. I talked to Kevin Rose from Jeremy Freshwater about that. He didn't share that concern. I don't want to speak for him directly, but he said that comment did not come from him as well. I don't know the version of that. From our perspective, it's a matter of scale. So if someone was out there for a couple of days sitting, raising clams with, cities that are big, that would be lost in the background. Most of the traditional districts that would be in that way. I would say that about 30 days that's out there. You can contact Kevin from Jeremy Freshwater about his opinions on it. He's more versed on it than I am, and I think he shares his opinion.
Carol?
David, I think I just heard a bit of a conflict in a couple of statements here. First of all, I would like to know how Jeremy determined that there wouldn't be any, I'm sorry about the wording here, water quality impairment from who you just said.
It came from, what was it, Bolton 4 years ago? We did a local letter, Jeremy Freshwater ran a localized study looking for the urea increases, the measured increases, and maybe Chris, you were involved with this as well. It was funded by LGA Park Commission fund, I'm not really sure, but the outcome of that was they didn't see any discernible increases in nitrogen and urea for known population areas. And again, that's something you can go to Jeremy with if you're interested.
And did they measure phosphorus?
Walker's, I don't know if they recall. I think they were also looking for measurement from the streets.
Just a minute. So if they're saying that there isn't related to the water quality impairment, and the collection, the other statement was, well, we collected it might add nutrients to the water column. So, I don't know. I just think that we need to sort that out a little bit more.
That was from the disturbance of all the
Yeah.
sediments, not from the excretion of the Asian plant.
Yeah, but still, even in that disturbance, would there be less absorption sites, from that disturbance? The two have to be related because of the soil properties. So just wondering if that was considered in the Jeremy's, not Jeremy's studies, but the Freshwater Institute.
In terms of the urea or in terms of disturbance of the sediments?
Well, in terms of any nutrients, whether what the soils, if you are going to disturb them, would that also relate to the impairment, water quality impairment by the plants themselves?
There was at Shelter Lodge, that's where they found a pretty strong depopulation, but I think they found, which I guess were available use, but they didn't see that same level of depopulation, and I'm not sure where else that worked in on the first of all.
I don't think they continued research on that since that project 4 or 5 years ago. And I think that was the end of it.
Okay, thanks.
Nothing right.
Chris?
One thing I add, the concern about the nutrient release and the work in sandy bed and pools, I think there is dual concern. Could there be nutrient release when you're digging it, as well as that's where the spores of the cyanobacteria are, that's where the blooms have occurred, that's where some of the research that has the internal loading of a cyanobacteria are residing in the sediments. If you're stirring up the lake bottom, would you release those cyanobacteria? Would you be putting more nutrients in the water column? Probably, if you're stirring up the lake bed. So I think that was where that came from. Speaking with folks from Jefferson.
And that could be.
There was no research on that, but I mean, that's where the origins are. Secondly, I think there was just some concern from the LGA standpoint that did there need to be a DEC permit for removal of specimens from the lake bed? I think we do need a DEC permit. LGA did not have one, so we weren't going to be the project co-sponsor or something like that. So that was another. We just did not want to be involved in the activity that may require a permit for the removal of living specimens from the lake. I think that's required. Those are a couple of things.
Very good. Project Review Actions Committee, we unfortunately or fortunately, whichever perspective, have none, so we won't need a report on that. Law Enforcement Committee report. Chairman Floyd, you got something to say?
The Law Enforcement Committee met this morning and reporting that we've now taken 2 boats out of the water, and our 2 PWCs are out of the water and are being put to bed for the winter. We have 3 boats at this present time at the New York State Parks Training in the village. We do this every spring and we do it every fall. This is, I think, about the 8th year we have done this. So they'll be over there assisting the New York State Parks Division in training various departments on use of boats on various lakes. All boats this season ran very well. We're very, very fortunate, and we will, of course, service them before when we put them away for the winter. Interesting note here is that this year we have consumed between 13 and 14,000 gallons of gasoline for our patrol boats. And as we all know, the price of gas is not a great issue today. So this is it's probably one of our most expensive items in all of our agenda, is maintaining these patrol boats. So it's kind of interesting that we do consume a lot of gasoline. It was discussed this morning. There's a concern. We have 2,700 accounts on the lake involving docks, and of the 27 accounts, roughly about 150 right now are past due on the fees that are required to have a dock on the lake. And some of these 150 are not just a year, they're several years. So it's a concern of ours that people should understand that there are dock fees, and if you do not pay your dock fee, there is penalties that are added to that. And we're going to come up with a new proposal with the staff to come up with a way to maybe to collect these past due accounts. But people should be reminded that you do have a dock on the lake, there's a fee for that, and you should pay that fee. We went into executive session and discussed some of our enforcement cases, those new and old, and then we left executive session and canceled the rest of the meeting. I have a resolution to read, Mr. Chairman.
Go right ahead, please.
Resolution 2022-37. Law Enforcement Committee met on September 20th, 2022 to review matters pertaining to the Lake George Park Commission's Marine Patrol and the Commission's Law Enforcement Program. And whereas active law enforcement cases and their status were reviewed in executive session, and whereas the Law Enforcement Committee has reported on the results of that committee meeting at this full commission meeting, and whereas the Law Enforcement Committee recommends acceptance of this month's law enforcement report. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the commission accepts the report of the Law Enforcement Committee. I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded, Mr. Chairman.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. I'm told by counsel, advised by counsel, which is
I like told.
correct order? Who was advised by her assistant counsel that I should have allowed the project review actions report to be, resolution to be read into the record. So would you please attend to that?
I will. Resolution number 2022-36, accept the project review actions report. Whereas the commission has received and reviewed the project review actions report prepared by staff and dated 9/13/2022, and whereas the project review committee recommends acceptance of the project review actions report, now therefore be it resolved that the commission directs that the project review actions report be incorporated in the minutes of the full commission meeting. So moved.
Second.
Motion, second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Carried.
Mr.
Thank
Chairman?
you. Yes.
I have one note I forgot to mention in our report. We will have patrol boats on the lake. There'll be 3 patrol boats on the lake for weekdays, for 2 on the weekdays and 3 on the weekends until Columbus Day. And then after Columbus Day, we'll have 1 boat until the end of October. And then we will remove all of our boats from the lake. Sorry for the...
Well, one will be
So amended.
available in
Thank
case
you.
there's an emergency.
Time for any public comments? Anybody have anything they'd like to remind us of, tell us of? Future plans? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion's made, seconded. All in favor? Adjourned? Thank you. 11:21.